Hello and welcome back to the latest Liverpool Echo Blood Red podcast. I'm Matt Addison with Paul Gorst and Theo Squires both alongside me this afternoon. Plenty for us to get into after that heavy defeat in the Champions League against Real Madrid, and a few big games ahead for the Reds in the top four chase as they aim to get back into that competition for next season. We will start though with Real Madrid, Gorst. We've not had a chance on this podcast to speak about that at all so far. It started so well, quickly fell apart for Liverpool. I mean, I don't know whether there's that much that we can learn from it, though. The same sort of frailties that we've talked about a lot on this podcast, the same sort of positives that we saw in the couple of games before in terms of the attacking. What did you make of the game overall? Were you that surprised with the way it went? Were you disappointed? What were your sort of emotions at Anfield?
Yeah, I think the big thing in the build-up to it was, can Real Madrid handle the Anfield atmosphere? How will they react to the red-hot, typical European nights that so many teams have folded under, really? And Real Madrid have kind of gotten away with that in recent years. Obviously, they had the game behind closed doors, and the only other times they met really were in Kiev and Paris, and they had that game in 2014, didn't they, when kind of Brendan Rodgers' side, the wheels were starting to come off. So they never really had to face up to that white-hot Anfield atmosphere that, as I say, so many other teams have crumbled underneath. And you question it. It'll be interesting to see how Real Madrid react to this. And 40 minutes in, you're thinking, okay, well, they're just going to fold like the rest of them. And, it's going to be another glorious chapter in European Anfield history. And then I kind of looked at it after 15 minutes. I was sitting next to Theo and I thought, in fact, I might have even said it to Theo, if there's one team that won't be properly ruffled by this, knowing that you're 15, 20 minutes into a 180-minute leg tie, 180-minute two-legged tie, it'll be Real Madrid. And so it proved. I thought it was, you can only applaud them the way they got themselves out of that mess and regained the focus and not only got themselves back into the game and the tie, but have now made themselves resounding favourites for the second leg. Liverpool shot themselves in the foot at times. The clearance with Addison was just a regrettable incident, but there was no surprise when it kind of bounced into the net and didn't fly into the cup. That's just sort of what happens to Real Madrid on these occasions, these events. Something I've been meaning to do actually, but haven't got round to doing yet, is seeing how much Real Madrid led for on their way to the final last season, because the games against Chelsea, Real Madrid, Chelsea, PSG, and Man City, I don't ever remember them having like two hands on that tie in any of them, really. They, kind of went ebbed and flowed, didn't it, throughout all of them. So that was one thing I wanted to look at, but you're looking at it now and, certainly they led for most of the second half at Anfield, and he was 3 minutes into the restart. Then Militao has free rein to head home, and I think that was the turning point, really. Once it went to 3-2, Liverpool lost the shape. They started to become ragged, and Real Madrid played like the holders of this competition. So it's going to be very difficult now in Spain in 3 weeks' time. I think Liverpool are probably best just focusing on the Premier League. I think now top four is a realistic option for Liverpool, and we're going to come on to the Palace game, I'm sure, but it was just a really chastening night. And it's sad, really, because Liverpool went into that game in Paris as Real Madrid's equals and could have went either way on the night, and it didn't. And now, 8 or 9 months down the line, Real Madrid are, pretty much the same team that they were, but Liverpool's just fallen so far down into the doldrums that they were no match for them, particularly second half.
Yeah, I think that was the big takeaway for me, really, Theo. I remember looking at the clock on about 15 or 20 minutes inside Anfield, and you thought, even at 2-0, there's a long way to go in this. You can still see that Real Madrid, like Gorsty said, were completely unflustered by it. And it is that contrast, isn't it? It's less than a year since we saw, Liverpool, Real Madrid being equals in Paris. Very much not the case now. And the second leg, you're looking ahead to it now with a bit of trepidation. If they can do that at Anfield, what can they necessarily do at the Bernabeu?
Yeah, their experience, it shone through. As we were just saying there, 15 minutes, there's so much football left to play. Like, many teams could just say, fine, we'll just sit back, take 2-0 and have confidence in getting the victory that you need in the home game. Like, if Liverpool a few years ago had taken 2-0 against Barcelona, like we saw them overcome 3-0, but 2-0, that coming back from Camp Nou, that would have been a positive result. and you wouldn't have begrudged Real Madrid from taking a similar sort of approach. Instead, they fought their way back into the game, and there were a few turning points there. I think like the way that the second goal goes in, you'd work so hard and start so well, and you're still finding yourself level because of a goal like that. I think David Alaba coming off, like Salah had him on toast, and then Nacho put in such a superb defensive display at left back. He wasn't really interested in getting forward, and the spaces dried up. And then the lackluster marking for the third goal after interval. But what was it? Goals in quick succession. We're on the hour mark, and Liverpool trailing 3 goals in this side. There's still 2 hours of football to play. Like they could have just said, "Fine, we'll lose by a goal, and then we'll regroup, go into the Bernabeu." Instead, they were chasing the tie as though it was the final 30, 20 minutes of the tie, and they needed to find a way back, and it just fell apart. And there were just so many holes in that defence and midfield, chasing shadows. Whereas Real Madrid, they've won this tournament so many times in recent years. Like Liverpool have won it, but they don't have that same maturity as Madrid. And they showed them up both on and off the pitch. Like you can see, Real Madrid have been in transition as well. This game was the first time Liverpool have played them under Klopp where the midfield hasn't been Modric, Kroos and Casemiro. They are in transition. They are needing to bring in younger players in. And that is going to happen again in the summer when you think of how old Benzema is. But the players they're bringing in, they're already doing their overhaul. Like you see Vinicius Jr., Rodrigo, Tchouaméni, Camavinga, Valverde. There's so many quality young players there who they've spent significant fees on, and they're just ready to carry on success. And it's a daunting task. Like if you're replacing Modric, Casemiro and Kroos in the midfield, when that midfield, I think, started for like 4 Champions League finals or something and won them all, and you've actually pretty done it quite successfully, and they could add Jude Bellingham to that. Fair play to Real Madrid's recruitment there, because they have played an absolute blinder and got the right players in. And you look at that and go, well, why have Liverpool had to be in this situation where, I know Klopp's come out and said in the press conference today, we couldn't do it last year. We've had to wait. But you've done all your attack in the space of 12 months. And now you're going to do all the midfield in the space of a summer. And you've got younger players there who aren't ready. Like Bajcetic has been a revelation this year, but no one expected him to be anywhere near that starting 11 in the summer. And you shouldn't be relying on an 18-year-old and needing to rely on an 18-year-old against the European champions. You think, what, Harvey Elliott, not ready for starting in midfield in these sorts of games. Curtis Jones, Fabio Carvalho, and the players out of form, players aging, players injury-prone, players out of contract. It's like Liverpool, if they wanted to stay on top over the last few years, this is stuff they needed to address whilst they're on top. They haven't, so they've had to take these couple of steps backwards. With Real Madrid, they've addressed these issues whilst on top, and that's why they might miss out on the Liga this year, but you wouldn't bet against them going for yet another Champions League title because they've got that extra bit of nous. They know how to stay on top, both on the pitch to get the results and off it as well. So credit to them, but this is that level we'll now need to reach. Like we thought, it's great winning every single trophy. They've only won it once, quite at that very elite level yet. They're going to have to spend big, do some serious work on their squad to get back there again.
Yeah, that's the plan, isn't it? To kind of get back to that level, Liverpool are going to have to do a good number of things. But just to sort of touch on a couple of the positives, Gorst, I thought that the first, obviously, the couple of goals that they scored, we have talked a little bit about this when you think of the Newcastle game and the Everton game. The attacking seemed to click back into a little bit of gear again. And, the Darwin Núñez finish, the Salah pass, Cody Gakpo had a good first half. There were some good signs to take, even if ultimately the frailties did end up sort of showing through.
Yeah, definitely. I think Núñez was quite good actually before he went off. His finish was just audacious, wasn't it? We've seen him try that a few times this season. For it to come off in a Champions League game against Real Madrid against Thibaut Courtois was some finish. He's up to 12 now, Núñez, and we're just starting to see the player that we've kind of banged the drum about for a while, haven't we now? He's just starting to find his feet a little bit, I think, now. Just off the left, gives Liverpool so much room to manoeuvre, when they're on the counter-attacks and so on. He's absolutely electric. Struggling to think of a player I've seen faster than him live, to be honest. And I think now he can be looking at the rest of the season thinking how close can I get to that 20-goal mark. And, for all the nonsense that we've had about him from rival fan bases on Twitter and whatever else, if he gets anywhere close to that in his debut season, he'll look at that as a fantastic return, and I'm just so excited for the player that he's going to be in the future. Gakpo, little bit of a slow build, isn't it? Slow burn. Took his goals well, certainly took his goal against Newcastle well. But yeah, they're not really the problem for Liverpool, are they? We know that it's been a rebuild of their attacking options, and they've reduced the age profile and trying to turn Gakpo into a little bit of a Firmino type, and Nunes has got the pace to rival what Mane offered on the left, and you've got Jota and Firmino coming back, and certainly Jota, I think, what is he, 25, 26, Luis Diaz is on the mend. So forward-wise, I think Liverpool are okay. It's kind of midfield, and now questions are being asked about the defence, aren't they, in terms of how many do they need? I think Canate was a huge miss. I think he has been for most of the season, really. He hasn't played much at all, has he? Maybe a dozen games or so. So it'd be nice to get him back. He's obviously back training this week, wasn't he? We'll see what happens with him starting at Sellers Park. Now, I just worry whether all those injuries to Joe Gomez have sort of seen him come on the slide. And I was thinking he's still only 25. New contract in the summer, but I'm worried now whether Liverpool can afford to phase him out. If that's not a harsh way of looking at it, I suppose if you're in Jurgen Klopps' shoes, you've got to be ruthless to an extent. I think Matt's been in awful form since he returned from injury. What was it? Just after the trip to Dubai. So I think there are big question marks for Liverpool at the heart of their defence. Certainly in midfield, we've spoken about that till we're blue in the face, haven't we? But I think up top, they're okay for now. We'll see what happens with Firmino. And, if he doesn't sign a new contract and he does leave, then I think Liverpool will need to do something there. Whether they will or not, I'm not sure, given all the gaps they need to plug elsewhere. But, just the same old frailties, though, isn't it, Liverpool, midfield-wise. No slight on Stefan Bacetich getting kind of outmanoeuvred by Luka Modric, but, it was the biggest game of his career, and he did well until 50, 60 mark, and then, he tired, as he tends to do. That may be something that the club will have to look towards, stabilising in the summer, kind of getting him fit enough for men's football for 90 minutes of Premier League football, because it seems to be a common theme, which is no major criticism of him. He gives us all, and at the age of 18 he kind of tires, which is, as I say, no major criticism, but something to look at. But yeah, generally we know that there are issues for Liverpool to resolve in the transfer market and on the training pitch, but like Klopp said in his press conference earlier today, it's just about kind of buttoning up, getting through these next 16 Premier League games, is it, and seeing where Liverpool finish, and then going from there.
Yeah, certainly going to be an interesting summer. Let's talk a little bit about the defence. Gorst, he's touched on it there, but Theo, I'll come to you on this one as well. There has been a bit of an increasing chat over the last couple of weeks around what they might have to do. Obviously, Joel Matip out of contract, not this summer, but the summer afterwards. Joe Gomez, a couple of question marks. Even Virgil van Dijk in some quarters, there's been question marks, which I think is maybe a little bit premature. I think there's still, a really, really excellent top-level player in him. But it is a bit of a conundrum, isn't it, heading into the summer? They've got, obviously, lots of question marks elsewhere, but it does kind of feel like the centre of the defence might have to be something that they look at.
Yeah, I think it's one where Liverpool's recruitment team approached it. They'd have looked at it as all neat and tidy, and you look at the attack first in 2022, then you move on to the midfield in 2023, and then you move on to the defence in 2024. But they'd have been expecting a bit more legs from some of these players, like the fact that Fabinho and Henderson could have given you a bit more this year, for example, and Matip and Van Dijk giving you a bit more, Gomez not being so fragile. But there are question marks there, and it has been about revamping this whole squad. It was, I think, Sir Alex Ferguson said you get like 4 years really out of a title-winning side, and then you need to make changes. It might not even have been 4 years. It might have been less than that, but you need to keep it fresh. Players that aren't used to your ideas, so there's that added competitiveness to it. Whereas this Liverpool team's been together since, 2017-18 with a few tweaks here and there. It hasn't had that massive surgery that some of the great teams have. And just like Liverpool fans growing up, you look at United and when they were getting rid of your Beckhams and your Van Nistelrooys and your Roy Keanes, and you raise your eyebrows at that, going, why are they getting rid of such a good player? But then looking back at it, you go, well, that's why they've made these ruthless decisions, because that's the decisions you need to do to stay on top. We've covered the midfield so many times. 4 of them will be not contracted beyond the end of the season. You'd say Liverpool need 2 or 3. Depends whether you count Bacetich as proper first choice midfielder now. You can start every game, or when you've got everyone in, having more of a squad player. What you see as Curtis Jones' best role, what you see Elliott's best role, but they are going to need a number of players in that midfield. It could arguably be you're looking for a new starting midfield. They've built a new starting attack. Could be a starting midfield as well. And then the defence, I'd say Joel Matip now is probably the time to move him on. He's had so many injuries in his Liverpool career. Last year was the best season of his career for Liverpool, and it was the one where he stayed free of injuries. But you've got to be looking beyond him now. You can't rely on him to stay fit, and he is horribly out of form. And Joe Gomez, it's just that big dilemma where they said he could be. They still consider him one of the best English centre-backs around, that they can get better and better in the years ahead. But his confidence, at the very least, looks shot at the moment. You can go from the sublime 1 minute to catastrophic the next. And he's had quite a lot of game time this year, so it's not as though it's a lack of rhythm that's affecting him. He's just very inconsistent. And it's a hard one to broach because he said when he was speaking to Doyley, I think in pre-season, he is still younger than Virgil van Dijk was when Virgil van Dijk joined Liverpool. So hypothetically, Joe Gomez could have 6-7 years out of his skin now and be one of the best centre-backs around. But he needs to find some consistency. He needs to find rhythm. And he's just got horrible backlash on him at the moment. Liverpool fans, when he came off on social media, he was clutching his hamstring. And fans were like, he's out for ages. There was a lot of noise like that, and it's just toxic. It's he's a young lad who's had so many bad injuries. You shouldn't be wishing bad injury on him again. You want to see him playing to the best of his ability. We've seen it a number of times where I suppose the more successful Liverpool have been, the more vocal minority are against certain players, like Adrian when he had the Aston Villa 7-2. And then you think back to when they lost the Champions League final the first time to Real Madrid. The reception Karius got at Anfield for the Torino friendly, that was, you'll never walk alone. It's that mantra. It's that proper what the club is about. You get behind these players because these players have contributed to Premier League titles, Champions League titles. It might be pretty horrible now how clubs playing, and players might be coming to the end of the cycle. But if Joe Gomez leaves in the summer, if Fabinho leaves, if Joel Matip leaves, they leave with every winner's medal possible around their neck. They are club icons at the very least, even if you don't want to give some of them legendary status. We are at the end of the cycle. There is a new chapter that will begin. So many new players will come in, and hopefully we'll see another period of success. But there's going to be a point where we look back and laud these players for what they have done. Well, they might not be the Steven Gerrards or the Jamie Carraghers. They have delivered so much more in terms of silverware, and it's what this club's been craving for 30 years.
Just in terms of Gomez, Gorsty, I think for me, the way I would look at it is I'd look certainly to move on Matip first just because of the age. And I think if you've got Joe Gomez as your fourth choice centre-back, that's a pretty good level for a fourth choice. Maybe the issue really this season has been that the others have not been fit. The rest of them around, Van Dijk hasn't been in perfect form. I think that there's definitely a case that Joe Gomez still has a long-term future at Liverpool.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? He is fourth choice, essentially, and he's still starting last 16 of the Champions League against Real Madrid because of largely injuries. Konate has been out, hasn't he, with that hamstring issue and got injured in the friendly, wasn't it, was it Strasbourg? The final pre-season game in late July. And because of that, he's certainly played a lot more at centre-back this season than he did last season. Last season, he was very much, a cup player at centre-back, and the odd game at right-back. I think when he started against Norwich, a little over 12 months ago now, I think there was some statistic about it being his first Premier League start at centre-back for... You'd have to go back and check it, but certainly he hasn't played a lot at centre-half in the Premier League, but because of, as I say, form with Matip, injuries to Konate, he's probably played a little bit more than some would have liked. I think at his best, I still think he's a very good defender, but I think it's a little bit harsh because he had that massive injury that he picked up with England. But I don't think he's been at his best for 3 years. Since he was partnering Van Dijk and Liverpool in the Premier League. And it's crazy to think that he's only 25 and he's obviously just signed a new contract. What was it? August, was it? So he's obviously not someone who's ready for the scrap heap, but you're just wondering now, how ruthless are Liverpool going to be? How ruthless is Klopp going to be? How much room to manoeuvre is he going to get in terms of funds? I'd be shocked if Joe Gomez is part of the shake-up, to be honest. I think he's, as you say, he's still young enough to potentially get to somewhere near his best and do that as a third or fourth choice centre-back. So I don't think he's going to be someone who's going to be turfed out on his year because of his poor season. But there's no getting away from the fact that he has had a poor season. There's the concentration levels for me, they just seem to go at the wrong time. So he was certainly culpable for the first goal on Tuesday night. I didn't think this pass back to Addison was great. Me and Theo were kind of in front of it, and it was bobbling up as it was going along, even though Addison has still had a bit of a nightmare himself. I look back at that goal against Leeds, 2-3 minutes into the game, and he's under hitting that back pass. Liverpool are 1-0 down, and the whole evening changes. The atmosphere, Liverpool end up going on to lose that game. Not putting it solely on him, but it's just concentration levels at key times that seems to be deserting Gomez this season. So he's someone who probably will have a question mark against him going into the summer, but I think given the amount that Klopp has to do elsewhere, I think he might just survive and stay at the club and continue to be a little bit of a kind of defensive right back / fourth choice centre half, and Liverpool might look to move on Joel Matip instead.
Gomez, he's one of these players that's a bit too nice. Like, you want that nasty side to a centre back. You want that leadership there, someone who can grab it by the scruff of the neck. That's why there's like Nat Phillips. He's an old-fashioned defender. You're not going to see him as a long-term option in Liverpool's defence, but you want more of those attributes in it. To have that nasty side to him, and Joe Gomez, he just doesn't have it. And I think there's a few players in this Liverpool squad where they've had so many years of everyone telling them how great they are because they're winning all these trophies, winning all these games. When things aren't going their way, a few of them sit at the bottom of the pile, noses out of joint. They don't like the backlash. They don't like the criticism. But there are others where it really affects them. Jurgen Klopp, I think, alluded to it today, saying they're used to these blips and getting criticism, but there are still young players in this squad. And what you can tell them, ignore social media, ignore the media all you like, but they're still seeing it. And it's like one mistake will lead to two will lead to three, because you can hear the groans when something happens at Anfield or a away day, and they're just waiting to crumble. They know what's going to happen next. You just need that extra fighting spirit in them to be able to shrug it off, because that's what like the best players do, what the winners do, because they've got that mentality. But then Liverpool, most of these players haven't had to really endure that for so many years now, because they've been so good for so many years. But then going back to what would you sell in Joe Gomez or not, you've got to also consider homegrown status, the club trained status. He is one of the few players in the Liverpool squad who was club trained, so that boosts them for UEFA European squads, and it's a space that's filled in the Premier League squad. It's something that also applies to Curtis Jones, because he's another one who can maybe head drops a little bit when the fans get on his back. They're vital because they fill these places in the squad, both for filling the full matchday squad, for the full European squad, and because they are that little bit of quality. You want to see them make those next steps, so they're not just depth options. And the longer they're doing this, and they are just depth options, showing no consistency, giving up that next level, the questions will continue.
Yeah, I think as you've both said there, it will depend to some extent the other stuff that Liverpool have to get done this summer. I mean, Jamie Carragher, Gorst, he said earlier this week that you're looking now at maybe 4 players to come into the Liverpool team. Jurgen Klopp, I think, made reference to a 4-player kind of transfer thing earlier today in his press conference as well. 4 seems to be the number that's been bandied around a little bit this week. Is that a number that you'd agree with? Is that kind of what you would like to see, if not necessarily what Liverpool will do in the summer?
Oh, I think it's a tough one to answer, isn't it? Because your answer depends on probably the most recent thing that you've seen. So if you'd have asked me after Newcastle, I'd have said, no, it's all been a little bit overblown, and maybe we've jumped the gun a little bit. But now you're asking me, and I'm thinking, rip up the team, start again. Count on one hand the amount of players you deserve to stay, but you need a little bit of balance. Certainly, as us as journalists, we need to give that balance, so we're not supporters who can go turning into players and demanding that they're all sold. So I don't know. It's a tough one. That I think Liverpool are going to need a summer similar to 2018, or maybe a year like 2018 when they brought in Van Dijk in the January, and then Addison, Fabinho, Keita, and Shaqiri. All, Shaqiri was the only one at that time that wasn't the kind of major statement of intent. That was a little bit of an opportunistic one. He filled the gap as a squad player, and by and large, he did really well. All the others were huge statements, game-changing signings, weren't they? And to be fair, 3 out of the 4 have been and were, certainly Van Dijk and Addison and Fabinho. So they're going to need something similar, I think. I think Canate and Van Dijk as a starting centre-back partnership next season is fine. You're not going to get a better right-back than Trent, regardless of how many compilations you'll see from rival fans of him. I'm not being the top elite defender or whatever. Sick of arguing that one, so I'll stay away from it. Robertson, you're not getting a better left back than him. Midfield is obviously where the big question lies, isn't it? And you sometimes lie to yourself. That we've seen Stefan Baccetis play like 6 or 7 games now consecutively, and you convince yourself that that's fine, but it shouldn't be happening, should it? Liverpool should have experienced midfielders who are in form, who are fit and able to shoulder that burden. It shouldn't be left to an 18-year-old to be getting legged by Luka Modric or whoever else was in the Real Madrid team. Thought Camavinga was excellent. Obviously, too many would have provided a little bit of kind of an easy little one to look at him and think, here's what he could have won, but he obviously wasn't there on the night. But Real Madrid have been doing what Liverpool have needed to do, and they've still got the brilliant Modric and Kroos came on, didn't he? But they've got Camavinga and Tchouaméni might feature in the second leg, and they have been kind of replenishing when they've needed to, and that's something that Liverpool are going to have to do in spades now because they haven't been doing it in recent years. I always hear the argument, and it drives me mad, to be honest, when I hear people on Twitter say Liverpool won the Champions League and they didn't buy it. The only people they bought were Sepp Vandenberg and Adrian and Harvey Elliott. As though that's a criticism. Yeah, I mean, when you make that argument to me, that you just show yourself up as only being interested in transfers, because Liverpool went and won the Premier League went and won the English League title for the first time in 30 years by 18 points. So who's bothered who they brought in? If they'd have brought in 4 top players, it mightn't have worked out. They might have finished second that season. So for me, that particular argument never stands up. But I think now, you can argue that Liverpool need transfers, need players, because where are they in the league, 8th or 9th or whatever, and they're 7 points off the top 4, and they've just been given a paddling by Real Madrid at home in the Champions League. So you can make these arguments depending on results, can't you? And that is when they should be made, rather than just lamenting stuff like that what I've just said. Maybe I'm rambling, maybe I'm not, I don't know. But Liverpool will need to do some work in the transfer window this summer. My worry is the ownership model. It's going to have to be altered slightly for Liverpool to be able to afford to do that adequately. And, it's a breaking the habit of a lifetime there for FSG. Some interesting Klopp comments that are coming on the site at 10:30 tonight. If you listen to this before that, worth probably checking out, because I think the Klopp has given the clearest indication yet that a big summer is approaching.
I'll give you a number. As a starter, an absolute minimum, it's 4. Like, they need 3 midfielders, they need 3 starting midfielders, and for the names that are being linked, if we're saying best case scenario, you get a Bellingham, you get Nunes from Wolves, and you get Mason Mount, that still leaves the question, do you need a number 6? And that depends with what you're doing with Fabinho. Now, I know this is going to sound very football managery, but then also they need a centre-back. The one that's being linked is the obvious one that everyone wants, Cavadiol. That's 4. Probably going to need a goalkeeper, let's be honest. Kelleher, wouldn't be surprised if they cashed in on him. Adrian probably goes on a free, so then you could argue maybe you need 2 goalkeepers. You need your experienced back third choice, unless you've got faith in a Pitaluga or a Harvey Davis to step up and fill that spot. You could look at right back and go, is Calvin Ramsey, do you want him to be your proper backup right back when he's just had the season that he's had with injuries? Or do you want to turn to Joe Gomez, Milner if he gets a new contract? Or do you want someone who is an out-and-out proper right-back who can come in and play those games when Trent is not at his best, or you having faith in Trent being back to his best? But then this is going up to 8 players now. 4 is the absolute minimum. And the issue is, if you're saying Bellingham is part of that 4, Cavardio's part of that 4, you're spending over 200 million on, 2 players there. And this is what Gorsty's just said with the model here. Who have they got to sell that can really make this money? And I'll get a bit for Nat Phillips, a bit for Kelleher if they go. Maybe Fabinho or Joe Gomez. I know Mrs. Fabinho has just laughed off suggestions that he's going anywhere on social media this afternoon. But this is what Klopp's got to consider in the recruitment team. And he said that as well. I think this was in the open section where he said it was the 4-player line. They need to know who's going before they can bring the players in. There aren't really many players that go in that are going to bring in the fees. So FSG are going to have to dig deep in their pockets and do something they've never done to sort of do this business. But we're speculating on this at the press conference as well. The money's got to be there for Bellingham somehow. For them to have waited so long, so there's got to be something there, some reason for them to have held back, waiting to do this midfield revamp. And they've found the money when they've needed it to get in Núñez, to get in Gakpo, to get in Diaz. We've just got to have faith that it all comes together in the end, and this season just turns out to be 1 step backwards before 2 steps forward next year. Otherwise, it's going to be a 2-3 year transition period at best.
Also, I think as well, though, I think Arsenal are a good example of what can be achieved when you get it right, and in a relatively short space of time. They've gone from being absolute also-rans last season for Arsenal. Liverpool played them 4 times, and I think Arsenal scored a goal, did they? They are now the closest challengers to Manchester City, and some would make them favourites for the Premier League title. They've done that by, obviously, they've got a coach who they've given time and space, and he's getting his ideas across, but they've also accelerated with some really smart transfers. Zinchenko, Jesus, obviously he's been injured for quite a bit now, but in the early part of the season he was absolutely flying, wasn't he? They brought back Saliba. I think it'd be fair to call him like a new player, wouldn't it? So they've been quite smart, and they've shown out the progress you can make. And they weren't, they were probably standard fees for top players, is what you call it now. Somewhere between 50 and 40 million, weren't they? So it can be done. You don't always have to spend 80, 90, 100 million on players who are coming in. And Liverpool have proven that themselves, haven't they, with Luis Diaz, for example, and we're hoping that Cody Gakpo kind of fills that role as well. So it can be done, but you're just looking at it now thinking Liverpool probably giving themselves too much to do in the space of one summer window. So we'll see. But I think Arsenal can be looked at as a good example to follow in terms of how your fortunes can change just by getting 2 or 3 right in the transfer window.
Just before we move on as well, quickly, I'll come back to you on this one, Gorsty, in terms of what Klopp said before. Theo mentioned there that the kind of 4-player comments and having to know who's leaving before you can sort of bring players in and that sort of thing. And I kind of take Jurgen Klopp's point to a certain degree, but then I just think maybe they could have been a little bit more ruthless with 1 or 2 of those players. Maybe you don't give the choice to an Oxlade-Chamberlain or a Keita or a player like that that's coming to the end of their contract. If you say to Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain at the start of last summer, for example, look, you're not going to play much next season. Try and find yourself another club. We'll let you go maybe for a bit of a cut price fee. There are ways in which you can kind of preempt that. He kind of said it in a way that was a bit like, well, there's nothing we can do. We couldn't move these players on, but Liverpool do have to some degree an ability to do that. They could have been a little bit better with the forward planning.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because we know Klopp is able to get the performances out of certain players because of that kind of attachment he has with them, emotional attachment, and he always says, doesn't he, he likes to be the friend, if not the best friend. And I think on the flip side of that, he has a tough time being ruthless and saying, look, your time's up here. Feel free to look for another club, and you can move on with the best wishes. I think I can never think of an example at Liverpool where he's been absolutely ruthless for someone who hasn't fallen foul of discipline. Mamadou Sakho was the obvious one where, for whatever reason, Klopp decided that enough was enough with him. But even the other way round, like I always remember Nathaniel Klein going on loan to Bournemouth mid-season, thinking, well, why have Liverpool have agreed that? The short of a sub right back now. I think it might have been the season he won the Champions League. So they were well in the thick of a Premier League title back with Man City by then. But it was kind of, well, it's what the player wants. So Klopp was happy to agree to it, leaving him the squad a bit short. And for me, that's not a major criticism from me, but a little bit of a criticism for Klopp, that sometimes he does kind of let the player have what he wants, and maybe that's how you get that kind of trust with the player and the performance levels out of them. But at times, it can be a little bit of an issue, like you say there, that example of Oxlade-Chamberlain. Klopp said early on, I think he said it when we spoke to him at the training ground in July, that unless someone tells me they want to leave, then everyone's going to be staying, and the squad is as it is. And that was how it turned out, wasn't it? So yeah, maybe that is something where Klopp can look to maybe change his ways a little bit. But I suppose, given the success he's had and the longevity he's had in the game, I suppose he might be a little bit too set in his ways to suddenly become all Sir Alex Ferguson and kick them out, drop them out on the rear and on the go. But it's just the way Klopp is, I guess, as a man manager.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting way of doing things. And of course, this summer, there won't be that kind of dilemma to solve. It will just be a case of the contracts are up, they've moved on, and Liverpool have got to try and find a way to replace those players. But that is still a good few months away. I'm sure we'll talk about that plenty of times before then. But we'll move on now to talk a little bit about Crystal Palace. We'll kind of throw the preview and the team selection together as we sort of talk through the teams that we will pick for this game. So Theo, I'll start with you. Obviously, we know who the goalkeeper will be. Jurgen Klopp did say to expect changes in the course of the next week or so. There's 3 games in a short space of time for Liverpool. So are you going to make any changes across the back 4, or will it be fairly similar to what we saw the other day?
I'd imagine you're going to see a change at centre back. I think it's probably too soon for Konate. He's tread carefully with Van Dijk, Jota, and Firmino. So you'd imagine he's going to do the same with Konate and couple of sub appearances before he can really be in a position to start, especially after the injuries he's had. So that probably means Joel Matip starts. Gomez was clutching his hamstring when he went off against Real Madrid, and Klopp said he didn't really offer an update on Gomez, but he said a few players have knocks, so you imagine that there might be a couple of changes here. Maybe James Milner can come in at right back or Tsimikas at left back, but I wouldn't make more than 2 changes. So one of the fullbacks put in the rotation option, and then Van Dijk and Addison keep their places.
Yeah, very similar for me. I think, Gorsty, I'm not decided on which of the fullbacks I might change, but it does feel like a game that possibly James Milner might fit into this team somewhere.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think it might just be a case of subbing out Gomez for Matip. I don't really. Obviously, they probably played a lot more over the last couple of weeks than they have been playing across January. But other than that, I don't see too many issues of swapping out the fullbacks. I still think that they're both vital for how Liverpool get something out of games, really, particularly Trent.
I've just made my mind up. If you make a fullback change at Tsimikas, because I think Zaha's back, and we know how Milner gets again, I'll get us on against him.
Is he back, Zaha?
I think so. He's back in training. So if he plays, Milner's always a walk-in red card when he faces him. So Trent keeps his place.
Interesting, yeah. Certainly a big boost for Palace, that one. Let's move into midfield then, Gorsty. I'm going to make a couple of changes in here. I think it seems like the time maybe to bring Stefan Bajcetic out of it, not permanently, but he did look very, very tired. I thought that the last sort of 20 minutes he was on against Real Madrid, he just looked absolutely shattered, which, fair play. I think you would be at that age having played that many minutes.
Yeah, exactly. It's, I think he's only played 15 professional games now, hasn't he? Started the last 7 or 8 maybe. It's hard to give him a bit of a breather. I think he's been good. Thought he was really good against Newcastle and Everton. But take him out the firing line a little bit. Maybe bring in Naby Keita, Henderson and Fabinho.
Yeah, I'm going to bring Harvey Elliott into the midfield as well. I think maybe Fabinho might drop out. Maybe have Henderson as the 6th. Theo, what do you reckon?
I'd go with either of your two there. I think you're right with the players you said to call out with Bajcetic, and one of the two from Fabinho, Henderson with Elliott and Keita, the obvious choices. the fact that Jones and Oxlade-Chamberlain in the Premier League games aren't making the bench and Artemello's not making the bench, be a surprise to see them suddenly leapfrog anyone in the pack in order to get starting games. So it's going to be between Elliott and Naby Keita. If we say only one, I'll go along with Gorsties, but I could easily see both of them coming in.
Yeah, certainly. I'm sure we'll see them across the course of the next week or so. I'll stick with you for the attack as well, Theo. Same again. That's what I'm going to go with, but there is possibly an argument for a change in there.
I'd go same again, but then at the same time, I don't know why I've got this like seed in the back of my head that when Klopp's talking about knocks and everything, maybe there's something there with Nunes or Gakpo because they came off early against Real Madrid. We know Nunes had the shoulder injury against Newcastle. Like, how bad are these injuries? Because he hasn't really said anything. And whether it's just rotation because they've had a tough game against Real Madrid or there are a couple of injuries here. We know how Liverpool like to keep it quiet when they can do. But if everything's positive and we want to be optimistic, it's the same front three because Firmino and Jota aren't there yet. Klopp said that himself. They're not quite at it. They need the minutes to get back up to the levels, but it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, if they're all fit, Gorst, is it the same again for you as well?
I don't know. I don't know whether I'd give Jota an hour. See what he's about. He obviously has, a couple of cameos off the bench. Still waiting for him to hit top speed. But I just wonder. I mean, Gakpo's played a lot, hasn't he? Since he came in, he's almost had to because of the injuries. So I don't know whether just putting Jota in from the off, giving him an hour, see how he gets on, and then you've obviously got Firmino and Gakpo to come in and take the pressure off him if needed. So, yeah, I'm going to go Jota down the middle and Nunes and Salah.
Yeah, certainly wouldn't be against that. Let's finish then with our match predictions. I think I'll go for 2-0 to Liverpool. I think they will bounce back. I think they will win. Gorsty, what do you reckon?
2-1 Liverpool.
Good stuff. Theo?
2-1 Liverpool.
Wins all round, and hopefully that is the case and Liverpool can bounce back from that disappointment midweek. We'll of course have all of the coverage in all of the usual places for you as well around the game. For now though, we shall leave it there. Thanks to Paul and to Theo for joining me, and of course for you at home for watching and listening along too. That'll do us though. We'll catch you next time.